Yes.
Okay. Uh-oh. We are. Look at that. Good morning, Thursday, April 17th, 2025. Education 101 for the Department of Motor Vehicles continues. And I would say, welcome to the chair. Please come on in. I'm looking at my witness list and I'm looking at the name on your uniform and they don't match, so I can't. Please come on, introduce yourself if you're starting off and we'll get started if you are ready to go.
I am. I'm ready to go. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Katita.
We'll introduce all ourselves to Steve. I'm Matt Walker. I represent Swanton and Sheldon.
Tim Parker for Bennington.
Molly Burke.
Okay.
Brattleboro.
Distracted by the phone.
Okay, Chloe Tomlinson from Winooski. Steve.
Jim Casey, Hubbard.
Patty McCoy, Pulteney.
Rich Keiser, Rutland City.
Candace White, Waitsfield, Warren, Moortown, Facein, and Duxbury.
Ken Wells, Orleans 3, Brownington, Barton, Orleans, Willoughby Lake.
Etc.
Or Westtown, Westmore.
That's Willoughby Lake.
Phil Pouch, Heinsberg.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Let me just tell you a little bit about how I got here in my career. I'm a little bit unique to commercial vehicle enforcement because I was employed previously in the industry. One of the first jobs that I had was a truck driver. My family owned a farm, and given the farm work, we drove a lot of trucks. I was good at it, had the opportunity to make a lot of money, and got into it early on. It is a hard life, and I realized it's not what I wanted to do. So from there, I transitioned into the military, served 4 years in the Marine Corps, came out, got a job with the Vermont State Police. I was there for 10 years, and then moved over to DMV, Commercial Vehicle Enforcement, been here for a little over 7. So we're going to talk a little bit about DMV, a little bit of the history, how we got to where we are today, and then what we do on the commercial vehicle side of the house. If you have any questions at any point, just feel free to ask, and hopefully it'll be educational and interesting material for all of you. So this photo is first photo. This was actually one of the first badges that the department had. A little bit of history there. So we actually started out as the Vermont Motor Vehicle Highway Patrol, and it was a motor unit. It was seasonal, and the motorcycles were actually owned by the inspectors. And given the weather conditions in Vermont, you can't ride motorcycles year round. And back in the early 1900s, a lot of the roads were seasonal and they were closed to traffic in the winter. So a lot of these individuals got laid off and then rehired on a seasonal basis. This photo was actually taken in Canaan. Gene is from Canaan. He knows a lot about the history of this particular photo. So the formation on June 16th, 1919, Era A. Griggs began his duties as the state's first motor vehicle inspector. Griggs served for 27 years as motor vehicle inspector, deputy commissioner, and chief inspector for the state until he passed in 1946. During his tenure, he saw the department grow from 1 inspector in 1919 to a total of 37 in 1946. In the 1930s, an increase in the number of roads which remained open to travel in the mid-30s led to the Motor Vehicle Highway Patrol inspectors, 28 in total, being kept on year-round in 1935. Inspectors were reimbursed for the personal use of their vehicles until 1937, when the state of Vermont purchased a fleet of 37 green Chevrolet sedans for the inspectors. This ended the era of the Department of Motorcycle Patrol Unit until 2018, when he was then corporal. He's now Lieutenant Matt Nesto began patrolling Vermont's highways on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. That photo was from 2018.
They should have kept that logo on the other side.
Yeah, should have been nice. This was a photo of the sedans in 1937.
Where's that taken?
That's really cool.
And this is the current motorcycle that we have today. It is an electric Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
And the same thing that plagued inspectors in the past, it is seasonal here in Vermont. So it does sit idle for a good portion of the year. But we do have it, it's in the fleet, and hopefully pretty soon it'll be coming out. This was also one of the first motorcycles, police motorcycles that Harley Davidson made in the electric platform.
I think we were the first, weren't we, the first state?
Yeah, thanks, I had it here in the stands a couple of years ago.
They had it out here.
Yeah.
Saw it.
Parked in the lawn.
We did count. Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
One of the challenges with the electric motorcycles, obviously, everything is smaller, so the battery is smaller as well. So it doesn't have the range that a gas motorcycle would, but maybe someday technology will advance enough, but that's the biggest limiting factor right now is just the size of the battery and able to put on a motorcycle chassis.
What's the range?
I think it's between 60 and 100 miles, if I'm not mistaken, depending on the terrain and how you're driving it, speeds.
Represent Wells?
How many of those bikes you got on the floor?
Just one.
Just one, just kind of experimenting or whatever, see how you performs.
That and it's not as easy. You need motorcycle endorsement and then there's special training that goes along. There's an actual motor school to learn how to ride a motorcycle in police application. And there's not a lot of opportunities to get people into this. We do have some interest now with some of the new inspectors, so maybe it'll expand in the future. So in the 1940s, inspector duty increased in the late 30s and 40s with the ability of the sedans to transport portable scales. As increased monies were spent on road improvements, so came the need to protect the roads from overweight trucks. Inspectors were tasked with highway patrol enforcement, crash investigation, inspection of vehicles for defective equipment, weighing of trucks, and checking compliance with licensing and registration. A lot of these tasks are what we still carry out today. And then we have the formation of the state police. So this was a photo of them. Talk about that here. So the investigation into the disappearance of Bennington College student Paula in Welding in 1946. Welding went missing while hiking the log trail. Foul play was suspected in her disappearance. At the time, primary law enforcement functions in Vermont were provided by local sheriffs. Errors were made during this investigation, which demonstrated the need for statewide law enforcement. And on July 1st, 1947, Governor Gibson swore in 27 motor vehicle inspectors and an additional 28 new recruits as troopers, creating the Vermont State Police. Only 6 inspectors remained at the Department of Motor Vehicles. So there's a little bit more to the story. With the local sheriffs being the primary law enforcement, it was fragmented. There wasn't a lot of communication. This investigation, which spanned multiple jurisdictions within the state because it was on the log trail, there were problems there. And ultimately, Connecticut and New York State Police came here to help assist in the investigation. So because of that, they recognized the need for statewide law enforcement, and that's how the state police were formed. And ironically, like I said, I worked for the state police for 10 years. I never knew that the original troopers came from DMV. It was just something that they never told us. So. Post 1947, following the formation of the Vermont State Police, the remaining 6 motor vehicle inspectors saw a reduction in their patrol duties. Their primary functions were in crash investigation, suspension of licenses, assisting motor vehicle examiners in the distribution of registrations. Motor vehicle inspectors continued with their roadside inspections verifying spot checkpoints that motor vehicles are properly registered and equipped to be on the roads. Inspectors monitored inspection stations to verify that they were keeping proper documentation and properly inspecting vehicles to which they affix inspection stickers. Again, a lot of the same functions that we still carry out today. So the foundation for the current Enforcement Safety Division. In September 1972, the foundation was laid for what is now DMV's Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Section, with the creation of 2 highway use inspector positions, which focused on enforcement with the permits for highway use, weight limits, and over dimension. In 1973, 20 sedans from the Department of Motor Vehicles once again began patrolling the highways while assisting the motoring public and enforcing highway laws. These are some of the job duties that we have today, current DMV inspectors. We enforce federal and state motor vehicle laws and regulations. The federal laws that we do enforce are actually state laws. They're federal laws that have been adopted by the state. So technically, yes, we do enforce federal laws, but they're actually state laws that have been adopted. Civil and criminal laws. We, on occasion, will get, DUIs, suspended licenses that are criminal, out-of-state extraditable warrants, just given the nature of trucking people, travel state to state. If we were not supporting law enforcement, we would have to call somebody else to deal with those things. We do issue warnings, tickets, arrests, and citations to appear in court. And we respond to crashes involving commercial motor vehicles. So one of the primary job functions that we have is size and weight enforcement. And we are the primary agency to do this. We do have some municipal partners that assist us in this. However, with the current staffing crises, size and weight enforcement for municipalities is falling off pretty dramatically. And in the last 5 years, we've lost about 50% of those municipalities. So we've done 2 classes in the last 2 years. And the first class we did 2 years ago, we had 3 agencies, municipal agencies that wanted to get into this. So in part, we loan them scales that are owned by DMV. There's an MOU agreement, and then they have to report their activity back to us at the end of the year. 2 out of the 3 didn't weigh a single truck and wanted to give the scales back. So it's nothing against them. It's just their priorities are calls for service in their municipalities, and it's just something that they don't see as a priority. So we do assist municipalities when there are problems.
Sorry to interrupt. I believe maybe 10 years ago, Heinsberg bought scales and they started to do that. I don't know if they still do it. Are other towns?
So Heinsberg actually has DMV owned scales. They are one of the few that are still active in the program.
Well, I mean, because of the dirt roads, and my understanding, it's lucrative when you catch people, bottomed out in the dirt road and you show up and you weigh it and you find out they don't have a permit. And I'll have another question. So my town clerk, we talked just a little while ago about how the town has to give permits to overweight trucks, and that couldn't there be a more state coordinated system? So if a truck has to go from Moncton, Heinsberg, Huntington, to get where they're going, they have to contact each of the 3 towns rather than just get one. And that allows, that. So anyways,
Well, and that's 100% correct. And one of the things that we do, this picture specifically talks, if this is spring mud road postings. We offer classes. We do it twice a year, generally one in the northern part of the state, one in the south. It's a class that's put on by local roads through AOT, and it's for town clerks, highway road foremen, and we tell them what they need to do to post their roads. It's kind of ironic because some towns are very into this and they do everything properly, and other towns don't care. And they may or may not throw up the signs, and there's no enforcement at all. It's so wildly different, which is very challenging for us as well, which is typically why we don't enforce a whole lot of it unless we get a call that there's a specific problem. And this photo was actually a specific problem. This was a construction problem.
I thought that was the billboard slide.
So the backstory here, they contacted the road foreman to get permission. This was a construction site. Road foreman told them no, that it was too warm. They made the delivery anyway, and that's where they ended up. So.
But they,
Maybe he was dyslexic or something.
Yeah.
Thought he said yes.
But that's, again, like, one of the challenges, so the highway road foreman, they can give permission to trucks to make deliveries, because it's all weather dependent, right? So,
Would you mind just kind of giving an overview in terms of what the expectations are for trucks? Like, so if they're traveling, like, what you all are looking for when you are pulling trucks over? I mean, are you just kind of patrolling the highways on a regular basis and eyeballing, like, that guy looks really big, I think I might want to, is there any kind of systematic formula to how you are checking trucks? And then municipalities, as Representative Pouch was talking about, like, so if a big truck is planning on going, for example, like through Route 100, like through the state, they have to right now reach out to each town individually if they're overweight, like,
no, because Route 100 is a state road.
okay.
So the state roads are covered under state statute. It's the local town roads. And as far as like, what do we look for? There's a lot of things, right? Can you see the load? Is it a log truck? Is it a dump truck that's, way above the sideboards? That's an indicator. The speed of the truck, is it laboring, trying to go up hills? Is it struggling? And then for me personally, I look at the tires, because the tires tell the tale. They carry the weight of the truck. And if you look at them, especially from the rear, and you see the side walls bulging, there's a lot of weight, there's a lot of load there. So is that 100%? No, maybe it just wasn't loaded properly. Maybe it's a dump truck that was loading on a job site and they could only get the material in the rear of the truck. There's different things, but I tell my guys, it's easy to talk your way out of weighing a truck. If you think it's heavy, just weigh it. The scales are going to tell you. There's no way around it.
Yeah, right before the pandemic, I had a constituent who was concerned, I live in Brattleboro, and who lived in Wilmington, and he was concerned about the number of trucks, especially the overweight and overwide trucks going on Route 9. And I started investigating the DMV, and I got some data about where the trucks were coming from. And one of the things that we were sort of finding out is it appeared that trucks were not allowed to go on the Mass Pike for a certain distance. Is that still true? I mean, there was something to do with maybe bridge height there or something. I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know the answer to
And one
that.
of the things is that, well, they could have taken the Mass Pike to get to 91. They were going over, Route 9, which is, not really an appropriate place for overweight. Some of it is doesn't have any shoulder. So I started investigating this, and then the pandemic came and sort of dropped it. But I just wondered if that Mass Pike was open now.
I don't know about the Mass Pike. I do I do know, I have talked to permits. I have talked to a lot of carriers as well. The way that the highways are structured in Vermont, it's easy to go north to south. It is not easy to go east to west. And the mountain range in the middle is
Right.
probably part of that. But it's either Route 9, maybe Route 4, depending, but Route 4 has a 90-degree corner right in town in Woodstock. So permits, that's one of the jobs that permits does, is they will route trucks according to their dimensions. And there's actually a slide here coming up about that.
But
But-
interestingly, one of the consequences of getting, when the federal changed the rules about weight limits on the interstate, because they used to go through the towns.
Yep.
And it was something that was really impacting Brattleboro. Consequently, once they changed those rules, trucks that formerly had gone up Route 7 started coming over Route 9 to get to Route 91. So sort of interesting.
Yeah,
Trying to solve one problem and create another.
and we'll talk about that in just a minute here. We'll talk about the bridge formula, why those trucks weren't allowed on the interstate,
Yeah.
and then why they are now.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's much safer to have them on the interstate than it is to put them through towns.
Representative Wells?
Is there a standard weight limit on these back roads, or it varies by municipalities or whatever? The town sets the weight, or is there a standard weight that cannot be on these roads in the spring?
So in the springtime, it's set by the town. There are state statutes per class of road. So generally on a dirt road, it's going to be a 24,000 pound limit. And then by statute, depending if it's a wooden deck bridge, it's going to be 16. The municipalities, if they need to, if that road is not capable of carrying the weight, they can downgrade that. Because ultimately the municipalities are the ones that maintain the roads. And that's part of the permitting process for the local permits, is the carrier has to show liability insurance. So we deal, a lot of it is logging. Logging typically happens in remote areas where there's not a lot of truck traffic. And a logging company will move in, you'll have the trucks coming in with the equipment, and then you'll have trucks for the duration of the job in and out. And then it ends just as abruptly as it started. But a lot of those smaller roads are carrying these heavy trucks. People aren't used to the noise. And we do feel a fair amount of complaints. And every complaint that comes to me, every truck is overweight and speeding. I'm not saying that people are wrong, it's their perception. But a lot of times we'll go out there and do enforcement action, and they're not speeding. They're just big and they're loud, and the weights are actually legal.
Representative Quinn?
So didn't we do something about weights on trucks last year or the year before? Didn't we talk about that?
There was.
I think it was
90,000.
milk trucks.
That
There was
was something,
some,
we did
because
something.
they were a little over, and we did something to,
Well, they wanted to increase it, we never did.
Okay.
Then they wanted to increase the weight,
Okay, I remember doing.
Which I think is-
talking about, Yeah,
some resistance to do it.
okay. I
Yeah,
remember talking about that.
The problem with the forestry industry specifically is it's a regional market. And I do work with the professional logging contractors of New England now, and I've had conversations with them. The nature of logging, you travel through multiple states just to access the markets. You have the paper mills in New York. Everybody knows the sawmills are in Vermont are closing. So they have to travel, and it's a requirement. The trucking industry is regulated federally with the exception of size and weight. That's left up to the individual states. So every state is going to have a different weight limit or different set of rules depending on where you are. So a truck coming from Maine, say, that crosses out of Maine through New Hampshire into Vermont and then New York, is dealing with multiple jurisdictions with different requirements, and you have to load to the lowest allowable weight, which upsets them pretty significantly because that cuts into their targets. So, but yeah, the spring road postings, we do get a lot of questions about it. It's inevitable. The maple nip industry as well, because when does the sap run? When the weather is warm. When the weather is warm, the roads thaw. And it's this constant battle with these different industries, different times of the year. Um, so heavy trucks damage roads. I am not an engineer, but I can tell you that I have enough training to know that this is indisputable. And the overweight vehicles cause disproportionately more damage to the road when their weight increases than would be suggested. An increase in axle weight can cause a significantly larger percentage of damage to pavement than the weight increase itself. For example, a 20% increase in weight can lead to 33% increase in road damage. The heavier you get, it exponentially expands. So the interstate system, the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, is an agency within the Department of Transportation that supports state and local governments in the design, construction, and maintenance of the nation's highway system through financial aid, technical assistance to state and local governments. The Federal Highway Administration is responsible for ensuring that American roads are the safest that they can be and the most technologically sound in the world. So we work quite a bit with FHWA. I write the size and weight plan for the state of Vermont. And basically what that is we tell them what resources we have and how we're going to use those resources to protect their infrastructure. And we submit that to them in July 1st, they review it. And then in October, we submit to them what they call the certification. And that's the proof of what we did. So how many trucks did we weigh? How many violations did we find? How many did we have to offload? And it's a perpetual cycle. And we have to do that and stay in compliance with them to continue to get their federal funding. And Vermont is a small state, and we really couldn't survive without that. So the federal bridge formula, Congress enacted the bridge formula in 1975 to limit the weight to length ratio of a vehicle crossing a bridge to protect America's infrastructure and standardize bridge design. This is accomplished by either spreading the weight over additional axles or by increasing the distance between axles. So this is a little pictorial. It really shows everything that we just talked about in a nutshell, right? If you have all that weight concentrated in a small area, it doesn't give the infrastructure time to rebound from taking, like in the top picture, it takes the load of the tractor, but then it has time to rebound before the weight of the trailer hits it. If it's too close together, there's no rebound. This is the actual scientific formula that it's based on. Again, I am not an engineer. I never really look at this, to be honest, but it is something that is backed by science and engineering. So like we talked about before, heavy trucks damage roads, and pavement will tell the tale, right? So some of the types of pavement damage that we see, potholes, everybody knows, everybody's seen potholes. Is it all truck traffic? It's not. The other thing that degrades asphalt is time and temperature. So the more traffic that it carries, the faster it wears out. And there's some science that say like an an 80,000 pound truck will do the same amount of road damage as like 6,000 cars. A lot of people will dispute that. I'm not an engineer, but the infrastructure, it does wear out. No matter how well you take care of it, it wears out. And heavy trucks, traffic in general is what wears it out. So potholes, that's one thing that you'll see in degraded asphalt. Alligator cracking, this is something else that you'll see. The interesting thing about the cracking is asphalt cracking actually starts below grade. So by the time that you see it on the surface, the bottom of it is already pretty well degraded. But I'm sure everybody has seen this in some capacity somewhere. Shoving. So this is another type of asphalt damage. Heavy trucks primarily do this. Happens more in the summertime when the asphalt is pliable from the heat, but it literally, the asphalt will move under the weight of the truck. And if anybody has come through the traffic circle on Route 2 down here, there's good examples of shoving right there.
You really notice another motorcycle.
Yes.
An excellent example in Heinsberg, because we have Heinsberg sand and gravel. And the trucks just, fill up, they head north. And, it was only paved maybe 5 years ago. And we've got, those ditches just like that right in town. I think because the trucks are just sitting there sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things that we do is industry outreach. And I do a lot with the PLC, the professional logging contractors. And last year I went to one of their trainings and it's a room full of logging people that work in the industry. And, they were beating me up a little bit. And I said to them, just to make the point, I was like, you guys are on the road more than I am. I know that you have seen this. This was not a Toyota Prius that did this damage, guys. And then it is pretty indisputable, but it's not just log trucks either. I don't want to beat them up. It's heavy trucks in general, any industry. Rutting, this is something else that you'll see in pavement. Again, this is done by heavy truck traffic. And the problem with rutting, especially on the interstates, is once you deform the pavement to get the ruts, you have water retention. And then when you have water retention, you have crashes. When it rains, cars don't slow down, they hydroplane. And that's where this all is connected. So like under federal highway, they have the money, they give us the money for the infrastructure. It's our duty to maintain and protect that infrastructure, which is one aspect. But the other aspect is to make the roads safe. So this type of damage, like I said, with the water retention, causes crashes. And when we investigate crashes, it's important to do crash reports because that data will also signify like problem areas. So if you have a lot of crashes on one section of the interstate continuously every time it rains, it's probably a good indicator that there's some water retention there, a lot of hydroplaning. The other thing is if you have an intersection that is plagued with crashes for whatever reason, maybe that intersection needs to be redesigned. And that's another aspect that Federal Highway will work with AOT engineers on and figure out why is that happening? Does it need a stoplight? Does it need something different to do that? And the overdimension loads. So any vehicle that's overdimension needs to get a permit to move. And the importance of the permits, there's a couple of different things, right? We're coming into construction season. There's a lot of construction zones. There's a lot of lane restrictions. So if you have a load that is 14 feet wide, you can't send them through a construction zone with a 12-foot lane. So that's one of the things that our permit department does, is they will route loads accordingly. And that's one of the reasons why Route 9 gets so many of the mobile homes. It depends on where the construction zones are, the size of the load, and then the engineering studies. If there's a load that is what they consider super load, it's greater than either 100 feet in length or 150,000 pounds, it requires an engineering study. So if they need to move something that's, say, 250,000 pounds, the permit office will pick a route and say, we're going to go this route, but then they send it over to the AOT engineers, who at times will have to go out and actually inspect the bridges, the infrastructure, to see if they can support that weight of that load. So when you break that threshold into that engineering study, the permit costs are more. So you have a lot of carriers that will deliberately falsify their applications to try to get the loads through without paying the engineering fee. So one of the things that we do, if permit suspects that that's false information, the permit office will hold the permit, will allow the load to come into, whatever part of the state, like either Guilford or somewhere where we can park it before it travels. And we will go down and physically inspect it or weigh it to make sure that it's within specifications. If it is, they will email us the permit, we can issue it. If it's not, then it gets parked and they have to reapply for the permit. And going back real quickly, we talked about it earlier. The federal bridge formula was actually what we talked about, the overweight trucks not being allowed on the interstate. That was the weight limit. 80,000 pounds was the weight limit on the interstate. There was no deviation from that. And going back to the timber industry, it was the timber industry that lobbied to allow that. And Vermont and Maine were part of a pilot program that allowed heavy trucks on the interstate. And that program is still running today. So that's how we allow weight limits that are higher than the bridge limit on the interstate. Any questions on that?
Zimber?
Just an anecdote, and shortly after that, Senator Leahy was here in the State House and came up to transportation and said that he had stuck that into a bill. He was writing, I don't know what year that was.
That would have been,
2010 or
yeah, about
11 or
that
something like
time,
that, yeah. So that was just an interesting little piece, because I know we had articles in our Brattleboro papers about the impact of trucks going through our downtown.
Yeah.
Because of the inability to get on the highway.
So just to clarify, so you're saying that in Maine and Vermont, we allow heavier trucks on our interstates than other states?
correct.
And so other states will route these trucks through non-interstate roads, neighborhoods, or and has that been a good decision for us? I mean, when you look at the,
It depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
So the FHWA thinks that they're not super fond of that because the pavement on the interstate isn't holding up as long as it had been. But again, like, would you rather have the trucks up there, or would you rather have them driving through your local towns? And I don't really have an opinion either way. I mean, it makes sense if it's more direct and easier to keep them on the interstate, let them on the interstate.
I'd rather have them on the train.
Representing Keyser's got our.
How many overweight permits did we issue a year?
That's in the size and weight plan. I don't know that number off the top of my head.
So you're unclear about how much goes on over the roads then, or you just don't, you don't have?
I don't know the number of permits, overweight permits.
Is it about 100,000?
It's several thousand.
Thank you.
You know what?
Some towns have really worked on rerouting these trucks here. Is Virgin's close to having a reroute and boarding the main street? You know anything about that?
I know a little bit about that, but I don't know the answer to that either.
22A,
Yeah,
on through the town.
I think we got two options for around that town.
Roads.
That's our main road.
right south. To that. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, this is another federal agency. They actually used to be under FHWA at one time, and now they are separated. Federal Motor Carrier is the administration that develops and enforces data-driven regulations that balance motor carrier, truck and bus companies' safety with efficiency. So they're the ones that regulate the trucking industry. So the Federal Motor Carrier Assistance Program, or MCSAP, is a grant administered by FMCSA to provide financial assistance to states to reduce the number of commercial vehicle crashes. So this is the MCSAP grant is what DMV uses to fund our truck enforcement efforts. And it's federal money that we get to do this, and with the ultimate goal of reducing crashes. Couple of crash pictures there. Under the federal definition, truck fires are considered a crash. And this was actually, I went to this was last summer in front of Bromley Mountain on Route 11. That was loaded with gasoline. That was a fully loaded gasoline truck.
That won't buff out either.
You know, just saying. Ironically, they drove the trailer away. But that's, yeah, under the federal definition, truck fires are considered crashes, whereas under the state definition, they're not. So there is a little bit of difference there, but we see quite a few commercial vehicle crashes.
Route 78.
Obviously, their insurance had to pay for the burnt pavement, right?
Yeah. Yep. So the high priority grant, that's a discretionary and competitive grant that provides financial assistance to enhance the MCSAP related activities. So high priority is broken down into two different parts. There's the commercial vehicle, and then there's the HP IDT grant, which is for technology. So because it's discretionary and it's competitive, you have to show a need for it. We currently do have a high priority grant. And we had a few years back, we had a bunch of fatal truck crashes. Those truck crashes occurred on rural roads, state roads, not on the interstate. So we have, in addition to our MCSAP funds, we have a high priority grant to do truck related activities on rural roads. And that, like I said, that's an enhancement. The other thing that they do is the technology grants. We did get one, and we used it to install our virtual weigh station in Colchester, on Colchester northbound. So what that is, there's a WIMS system that's put into the pavement, which is weighing in motion. And we can weigh trucks, and if you take a WIM and you have it perpendicular across the road, you get the weight of the truck as it crosses. But if you take the WIM and you put one at a 45-degree angle, you can actually hit the individual tire weights, so you can detect tire anomalies. So if a truck has a flat tire, it can detect that and let us know as well. And believe it or not, flat tires, not only it's a safety thing, right? Everybody's seen the tires come apart laying on the interstate, but what it does also is it damages the pavement, because now you have a truck that was designed to have a dual set, and one of those tires is no longer load bearing, so all that weight is on a single tire, you have more pounds per square inch pushing on the pavement, which does damage, just like not having a, an overweight truck. So we do have another project that we're going to use HBIDT funds for. We're going to install 2 additional virtual weigh stations, one in Coventry and one in White River Junction. So we're using DriveWise, and DriveWise is a computer program that we use that electronically screens trucks prior to our fixed site details. So this is an example of what our computer screen looks like. And as you can see, wherever we work, you can, this particular site is Hartford 91 northbound, which is currently closed. But if we were to open that site and do an actual fixed site detail, we would open it. And then any company that is registered with DriveWise will show up on the screen. It pre-screens the company, and then it tells us what their safety score is. This one's blacked out here. But every DOT number is specific to a certain carrier that will have a safety score. So that safety score is based on an algorithm. It could be from multiple inspections where they got placed out of service, where that score climbs. Or the other thing that'll do it too is if you have a company that hasn't been inspected in a while, that score will gradually climb on its own. So we use the inspection selection score to screen trucks. The other thing that we do is we look for visible violations, or the other thing that we do is just random inspections. Everybody, back when I first started this job, there wasn't a truck driver out there that wanted to get an inspection. And I personally have seen a change in that in the industry, because the DOT information is public. So companies, insurance companies specifically, will check their clients periodically to look at their safety ratings, and they'll raise their rates accordingly. So the other thing is the load brokers will not give the good paying loads to people that have high scores, because they assume that it's a risk. So what I'm seeing now is a lot of truck drivers, smaller companies, they generally take care of their equipment, will come in and they will ask for inspections because they take care of their truck. They're not afraid to be inspected. They just never get selected. And that's part of the reason why. But DriveWise is a great tool. And like I said, we're adding the whims and the flat tire anomalies. So before that truck even gets to us now, we'll know if it's overweight, suspected of being overweight. We'll know if there's a problem with the DOT, if it's been flagged, or the other thing, DriveWise will randomly select their clients. Usually it's about 2% pull in for an inspection. So technology on our side, the enforcement side, is really rapidly evolving. WIMS is not new technology, but it is for New England. It was used down south for many years because the climate is more gentle, and the technology is advanced enough that it's actually usable here now with our climate. Yep.
So is DriveWise, is that connected with these virtual weigh stations that you were talking about?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so people, and those are installed on 89?
Yes.
So, okay, so, and do you turn them off and on, or is everybody getting weighed? Like, say you're going through Colchester and everybody's.
So it will capture weights 24 hours a day. And we can use that, and we share that information with our AOT engineer partners, because they need that data. Because FHWA requires it as well. So they do weigh 24 hours a day. And with this type of technology, we can also identify if there's a problem carrier that operates habitually and, you know, grossly overweight at a certain time, we will be able to see that.
And so the trucks that are being weighed on the virtual weigh stations have to be signed up with DriveWise or no?
No.
Okay,
So all truck traffic will go over the WIMS. But the companies that are signed up with DriveWise, that's a service that they pay for, where they can actually bypass the weigh stations because they're electronically screened.
okay.
So they don't find any anomalies. They don't see anything wrong with that.
So they're being a little bit more proactive about getting inspected and.
Correct. Yep.
Representative Toy and then Representative Couch.
So are these virtual weigh stations only on interstates or are they on state roads like State Route 30 or 22?
Right now, they're only on the interstates.
Okay,
We only have one of them that's functional, Colchester. The next two projects, Coventry and White River, have not been installed yet.
okay. But are there plans to have them on like, say, 22A or 30?
In the future, what we would
Seven.
like to have, first, what we want to do is the interstates where they are, we want to hit the bypass roads. So that if we have trucks that are getting off deliberately to bypass us, then we can capture that data. But it's a work in progress. And they've talked about Route 4 as one of the next ones
Yeah.
after the interstate to get that technology.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry if I missed it. Did you say that the Waze system, the WIMS, actually can identify the truck if they're in the program?
It uses a camera basically it's a high-speed camera that will take a picture of the DOT number.
Hmm.
And then it identifies the truck through that.
Is this, truck goes over, it's in violation for whatever reason, let's say, really negligent violation. And you can see it. Is that enough information to actually, give a civil violation or a violation to the truck company?
On the WIM, so on the WIM, are you talking about weight specifically?
Well, whatever the whims can pick up. Yeah, let's say weight.
Yeah, so we cannot write, because the WIM is a high-speed WIM, there is a margin of error. So it'll identify the heavy trucks and then we have to weigh them with another form, whether it's a platform scale or portable scales. And those scales that we use are certified and that's what we write the ticket.
Right.
This is just a tool to make us more efficient.
It's a survey tool
Yep.
to see what's going on.
Yep.
But it will identify trucks that have this program.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Representative.
I think that answered my question, but so this WIMS virtual weigh station alerts your team that something's going on, and then you take that information and then act upon it and if you find a weight error or then you can issue a violation or whatever, but you're not using that system to issue any violations. It's really just
It's a
giving
screen.
you more information. Okay.
Yep.
And do you have to put signage up to alert trucks that this system that they're driving over this system?
No. Like I said, because if we're not there at that fixed site detail, there's no enforcement action. It's just data collection at that point.
It's
Like I
not,
said-
is it getting recorded and people look at it later, or no, it's just,
Yes, yep.
okay,
And it's the same, so AOT, they have WIMS on Route 7 and on Route 279 that they capture data for their pavement quality projects. And then they also share that with us. So they're sharing with us their information and we're reciprocating that. So it's a more efficient, you get better bang for your buck doing that. The one thing about WIMS though, like I said, because it is a high speed weighing in motion, the pavement quality has to be pretty good. Because if the pavement quality degrades too much and this truck starts to bounce, that balance is gonna throw off your weights because it's not actually what the truck weighs if you're catching it on the up bounce or the down bounce. So there is a little bit of maintenance with these projects to maintain that asphalt to a certain level. But they're very efficient and I mean, Maine has a system that's even more advanced than the one that we installed up in Kittery. We went up and looked at it and they have one guy that can run that by himself and just screen hundreds of trucks a day. So there is money, like I said, we're using grant funds for it, but it really makes our job way more efficient. You can target those carriers that are problematic. So CVSA. CVSA is a nonprofit organization that focuses on improving commercial motor vehicle safety through inspection programs, enforcement, guidance, training, and advocacy programs. So what CVSA is, like it's a nonprofit, but it's comprised of enforcement and of industry. So CVSA is the ones that will publish the out-of-service criteria. So FMCSA is the government agency that oversees the motor carrier regulation. And what CVSA is, they have representatives from both industry and enforcement, and they kind of come together and have meetings. There's different committees that talk about, issues and things, and they will come up with the out-of-service criteria. And this is what we follow. We don't make this up. These are recommendations that are made by experts, like I said, from both industry and enforcement. So if there's problems or disagreements, they'll call in experts who will testify, yes, I don't think a truck in that condition should be let to go down the road, or yes, that can be repaired at a later date. But all of this information changes. April 1st, every year, there's a new publication for this. A lot of it stays the same, but there are changes every year. Different technology and just different parts, different components will change based on construction and stuff. But Gene has been to many CVSAs. He's been on several committees and had input into this. So CVSA enforcement events. These are some of the enforcement events that they have. They have brake check. There's one published and one unpublished event. So a couple of reasons to do that. If you tell the industry that you're going to be doing this particular thing at this particular time, maybe proactively they will fix some of their defects. And then the unannounced one is to try to capture an actual unbiased representation of the condition of the vehicles on the road. So there's two of those. They also do a human trafficking prevention program. It's Truckers Against Trafficking. Vermont does participate in that. We hand out brochures, and just given the nature of trucking being, multiple states, it's easy to traffic people or have trafficked people involved in the industry. So we are trained to look out for that and identify people that may be trafficked. The IFTA Blitz. So going back to what we talked about earlier, heavy trucks damage roads. Heavy trucks are required to file for IFTA. IFTA is International Fuel Tax Agreement, where the carrier with their apportioned registration will actually pay to use roads in the state that they operate on. So if a company is registered in Texas, say, and they come up here and operate on our highways, Vermont does recoup some of the money for that truck operating on our highways, even though they're not registered here. So The reason why the IFTA Blitz is in March is because the quarterly fuel taxes are filed quarterly. And it gives them the first quarter to get their affairs in order. And then after that, it's enforceable. Number 4, international road check. That is the 72-hour nationwide event where Vermont participates as well. We do truck inspections throughout the state. Like I said, it's a national event. It's a good way to capture data on the industry. And CVSA will also identify trends and violations, and they will give us specific guidance as to what they want us to focus on each year. Safe driver, that's another.
Sorry, I just assume it's secret when that happens.
No, it's not. So the only thing that's, like I said, other than one of the brake checks and the hazmat blitz, these are all published.
Okay.
So for whatever reason, it still catches companies off guard. But these are all things that happen every year about the same time. They used to have it the first week of June, and then the southern states complained that it was a little too hot. So they moved it to May. So it's in May now. It's coming up next month for us. And then Safe Driver. Operation Safe Driver focuses on speed and seatbelts, driving. Problematic drivers is what we focus on there. And then the Hazmat Safety Blitz, we focus on hazmat carriers, excuse me, and look for hazmat violations. And that's, again, something that's unannounced. But all the data is submitted back to CVSA, and then they'll process it and give us guidance for the next year as to what we're looking for.
Can you, we meet with the truckers, you know, and I was astounded by how much camera and sensors they have. Can you describe, do you use that in investigations, or do they share it, or?
The only time that we would use that information is a post-crash inspection. If that vehicle was involved in a crash, and depending, a lot of the times, it's not the commercial vehicle that's at fault, it's the passenger car that caused it. The carriers will gladly hand it over to you and say, hey, look, this is exactly what happened. It's a great tool for us.
Are you allowed to get it? Do you need a warrant to actually get it if you were doing an investigation?
So if there is a federal law under the Motor Carrier Administration that they are supposed to give that to us. If it is a criminal case, if that truck driver was negligent and killed somebody, we would get a search warrant for it anyway.
Would that be true for cell phones in car crash investigations?
Yes. Yeah. If we suspect that that was the cause, then we would go that route.
And a warrant's needed.
The warrant's needed.
Are they-
Anything that turns criminal would.
And are they easy to get? I mean, if you got a crash, somebody's killed or injured, and you say, this is what we suspect.
Yeah, they're not difficult. It's just, it has to go through the courts.
Yeah.
It's approved by the local state's attorney, which is good because that kind of gives them a heads up that this case is coming. They'll read it, say, yeah, approved, send it to the judge. The judge will either approve it or deny it, based on whatever you present to them. And then you go forth from there. But you're 100% correct. The technology on these newer trucks is unbelievable.
Yeah. Where they can actually monitor their drivers, and if there's a braking event, a certain braking event, they can go and look at the cameras and see the driver's face. Was he paying attention before that? Yeah.
Yep. There is good and bad to it. The only bad thing that I can tell you, I did last year, I went to a slide off near exit 5 on the interstate. And what had happened was the driver was approaching the exit ramp, and a passenger car had passed him, cut over too close to get to the ramp, and the truck detected that potential collision and applied the brakes. and there's nothing he could do.
Automatic.
And because of that, he lost control on the snow covered road. But that's honestly, that's the only time that I have ever encountered that. More than not, it's gonna prevent a crash. But the technology is so rapidly evolving. We don't see a lot of it now, but there's a lot of autonomous trucks that are operating in Texas. And that, to me, is just amazing. The fleets will, with the AI intelligence, the trucks, individual trucks will learn and communicate that with other trucks. And if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would see it in my career, I would not have believed you.
You see a need that there's gonna be motor vehicle regulations are gonna need to be updated as a result of this level of technology? I think that is a yes over there. Okay.
There's already been.
We'll be well behind the curve when it time comes. When we need them, we'll be a few years behind.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because this year alone, FMCSA industry has petitioned, when a truck breaks down, drivers are required to put their emergency warning triangles out behind them. So they wanted an exemption for autonomous trucks, because if the truck breaks down, there's no way that could happen. And currently, FMCSA did not give them relief from that regulation. So it is a matter of time, more than likely, but there's gonna be some.
How about a little trucker robot, a little chain and one wallet.
It'll probably be
Put
here.
them cones out and stuff. We're light years ahead.
All right, so North American standard inspection levels. There's 8 of them total. The reality, most truck drivers here in Vermont are either going to get a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3. And a level 3 inspection is just driver credentials. So if you stop a truck for speeding, it's a driver violation. That's probably going to be on the side of the road. It's going to be a level 3 inspection. You're going to check and make sure that driver is properly licensed for that vehicle, that he has the proper endorsements, and that the logs, his hours of service, he's not exceeding. And it's pretty much just a driver-only inspection. A level 2 inspection is you do everything that you do in a level 3, and then you do a walk around of the truck and you look for visible mechanical defects, lights that are out, anything like that, flat tires. A level 1 inspection, you do all of those things, but you actually physically go under the truck and you look at the braking components as well. So a level 1 inspection is what we do, like mostly during truck week or brake check week, because you're not going to capture that data that CVSA wants without doing that level of inspection. A level 4 inspection, that is an inspection that's looking at a specific vehicle component. So, for example, a few years ago, there was a widely debated topic about rear end protection on trailers. And to get accurate data about rear end protections, they had us go out and do a bunch of level 4 inspections where you literally just look at that particular component. Are there problems with it? What are the problems? And then document it. Level 5 inspection. A level 5 is the same as a level 1, but there's no driver. So we use those mostly for motor coaches and buses, where we here in Vermont, we don't do bus inspections unless it's at a bus terminal or a destination location, because that bus is going to have 60 passengers on it. You really don't want to hold them up for an hour while you're checking everything, and then God forbid you find a violation and have to park the bus. Then you got 65 people at a rest area or somewhere that you have to deal with. So we here in Vermont do destination and terminal inspections on buses. Those are primarily level 5s. A level 6 inspection That one is quite a bit more complex. That is for your radioactive materials. And not just any radioactive materials, those are your very high levels of radioactivity. Vermont does see them. There are cobalt-60 shipments that come out of Ontario, Canada, that will go down to Boston, Massachusetts. And what they use it for is sterilizing surgical equipment. So we don't see a lot of them, maybe 2 a year, but that is a pretty in-depth process. It's a level 1 inspection, but the out of service criteria are actually different. The standards are much higher. Basically, that truck needs to be defect free before we let it go down the road. And that's because that cargo is so dangerous. If there was an accident, that would cause a lot of problems. So you do your level 1. There's a bunch of additional steps, and then you do your regular hazmat inspection for those. And then there's a separate decal that those trucks get to prove that they've been inspected and can travel in the United States. Your level 7 inspections, those are state mandated or state jurisdictional inspections that are vehicles that don't fall under FMCS regulations, FMCSA. Those are your state plow trucks, trucks that are owned by the government that aren't regulated by the FMCSA regulations. And for whatever reason, there's been a lot of plow truck crashes. A lot of cars have seemed to crash into AOT plow trucks this year. And that's the level of inspection that we do, is a level 7 on those trucks post-crash. Your level 8 inspections, that technology is rapidly evolving, but we are currently not doing them yet. That's a virtual inspection where the truck basically doesn't stop at our fixed site detail. So we talked about how companies pay to be on driveways where they're allowed to bypass the weigh stations. But if you remember, we also talked about the safety ratings and how if you don't have inspections, your score will creep up. So level 8 was developed to counter that. And basically what that is, it's a virtual inspection. The truck, trailer, driver information, hours of service is all communicated to us electronically without the truck ever stopping. So we can do pretty much half of the inspection without ever even actually seeing the truck. So that's a technology that's rapidly evolving. Like I said, we're not doing them yet, but we will be shortly.
I can see the violation on the right there. What's going on the left there?
So we got the broken springs on the right, and here, the upper coupler on this trailer, that's all corrosion.
Okay.
So that is supposed to be solid. That was like a 1-inch gap there in the middle.
Separating.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of junky trucks on the road.
Mhm.
So part of what we do also is we do hazmat compliance. And these are a couple of violations that I found. So obviously, I mean, you have flammable gas cylinders that are rolling around in the back of the truck. That's not good. This one here, this was on a FedEx truck, and they put their tracking label right over the marking, the label there. So we will do that. We don't actually, on a roadside inspection, we don't really check a whole lot with the hazmat other than that it's documented properly and that it's in the proper packaging. And even this cardboard box, you see the information down here on the bottom, that code, Ford B and all that, that's a specified package. So even though it's a cardboard box, that particular box is rated, for a certain amount of weight, and whatever that substance is has to be in the right package. So we'll check packaging, we'll check cargo securement, make sure that there's things not rolling around in the back, make sure that they have shipping papers and placards, right, if required. Because the blackbirds will communicate to us if there is a crash, what that product is, and that there's something dangerous in that truck. There's a lot of times, I mean, I've gone to crashes where there is just stuff all over the place, and one of the first things that I look for is either shipping paper or blackbirds, so you know what you're dealing
I gotta be looking for ice cream first.
with. Or beer.
I see, was it an ice cream truck tipped over there? I saw in the news a few years ago. I was like, well, that'd be nice to go on, especially on a hot day.
That was on 78, wasn't it?
I can't remember, but I remember
It's happened on 78, I know that. There was ice cream in every, anyway.
tasty.
78 is a bad road for.
And that's,
commercial
it's
vehicles.
right to your point too, and that's one of the things we'll do. We're not the primary agency to regulate like food quality.
Yep.
But when we do truck inspections, if there is refrigerated foods, the shipping paper will indicate the temperature that it has to be kept at. So the reefer units on these trailers are diesel powered. If that reefer fails or the driver doesn't run it to try to save money, and we have a food item that's above its temperature, we have to contact the health department.
You know?
So we work with these other state agencies. We're not the primary entity to do that, but we're the ones that find the violations because health department is not out inspecting trucks. And it does happen on occasion. So we also work with Agency of Natural Resources with their waste haulers and waste hauler permits. Again, they're not out inspecting trucks, but if we find a violation, we'll report it to them and then they can follow up later. We also do a little bit of diesel exhaust stack testing for them. So defective brakes. And these are, when you look at the out of service criteria, everything is listed alphabetically. So these slides just kind of go down. And these are all things that I personally have found on Vermont, on trucks that are in Vermont. You know, this brake is locked up. You can see the smoke pouring out of it. This one here, that's the brake shoe. That is never going to touch that drum. That's an inoperable brake. Cargo securement, something else that we check for. You know, this guy here threw a bunch of hand tools under the machine. There's nothing holding them on the deck. So what if a passenger car, what if you were behind that? He goes over some bumps and next thing you know, you got a rake coming at you. This one here on the left, that was a guy that I pulled over on Route 100. That machine was completely unchained. And you would not believe I probably find one of those a year. And it is nothing but laziness.
That one's very excusing.
Mhm.
Well,
And that's one of the nice things too about our job is when we write tickets, we can write them to different entities. So for example, if that driver doesn't own that truck, he's an employee, right? If the company didn't provide him with the chains to chain that down, I would probably write that ticket to the company. But in this case, the company did. He had the chains, he just chose not to do it. So the driver, in this case, got the ticket, not the company. And it's the same thing, we can do that with overweight fines as well. Generally, we don't write the drivers because they're only employees. But on occasion, I've had companies call me and specifically request that I send that ticket to the driver because that driver has been warned habitually. And for, you know, he gets paid by the ton. So for him, it's beneficial. And usually it only takes one ticket and that'll solve that problem. Coupling devices. Again, these are trucks that I found in Vermont. Here, you can see the fifth wheel plate is cracked right in half.
you know,
And when we disconnected that, the crack went entirely through the fifth wheel plate there. This one, This is a pintle ring. You could see the wear on it. That's worn way where it's safe. And these companies, they don't understand, like, they think that we harass them, but when you show them photos like this of stuff that we pull off the road, they kind of get it too. If we didn't exist, there would be a lot more fatalities. Cracked frames. I mean, you can see this one here, you can see it. And that one split right across the top there. So even, the good thing about roadside inspections is even though not only does Vermont require inspections on heavy trucks, but it's a federal requirement as well. And there's actually a federal inspection sticker because not all state inspections will meet the federal requirements. So Vermont does. Our state inspections meet the federal requirements. But these trucks carry so much weight. And it's not like a passenger car. They'll operate for, 10 hours a day continuously. So the components wear out much faster. And that's why we check them, more than once a year. Fuel leaks. We do find them quite a bit, actually. Pretty self-explanatory. Suspension components. This one here, you can see not only is the spring broken, but the U-bolt is broken. I suspected that driver hit something very hard. And that axle was actually not being held in place by anything. This one here is a spring. The main spring is broken here. And that happens on occasion. Springs break more when the truck is empty because they bounce more. But these are your steering components. So this picture here on the left, this is your gearbox. This is what you call your pitman arm. So when you turn the steering wheel, the center of this turns, and then that moves this pitman arm back and forth. As you can see, this was so loose that the box was spinning inside the pitman arm, which is a serious violation. If that were to come off or not grab at all, there is no steering.
I mean, I'm sure your violations vary, but what would a violation cost for some of these? Some of these things, I mean, it's not like $100 ticket, right? It's a lot bigger than that, isn't it?
It depends on the violation and how many violations there are. So it's anywhere, I mean, it could be from like $160 up to $600 per violation, depending.
When you find a really egregious safety violation, what happens? Does the truck get kind of sidelined and their company has to come get it and take it back and fix it?
Yep. So anything that's in the out of service criteria that we talked about, if we find any of those violations, then the truck gets put out of service. Depending on what it is, so like cargo securement, for example, the photo with the rakes, that is an out of service violation. Though that's unsecured on the deck. If that driver takes them and either puts a ratchet strap on them or throws them in the cab of the truck, that violation has been fixed and they can leave. Something like this, that truck is going to be put out of service and they're either going to have to fix it on scene, like call roadside service, or they're going to have it towed. And then so with most trucks, you have 3 different entities, right? You have a truck, a trailer, and a driver. You can put any one of those 3 or all 3 out of service. So say that driver didn't have the proper CDL license for that truck. You put him out of service. And then you find that on the truck, then the truck gets put out of service. and then you find one of those broken springs on the trailer, you can put all three of them independently. So depending on what happens there, if it's just the truck tractor, the company can send another truck tractor. The driver can jump into that one, hook onto that trailer and leave. It all depends on the situation.
And one other question, you talked about human trafficking earlier. I'm just curious, do you find much evidence of that in Vermont?
There's been a few instances that have been kind of questionable. It takes a little bit of investigation. And obviously, people that are trafficked aren't going to tell you that they're trafficked. So it's the totality of everything that you have to look at. If they're in a truck, the nice thing about the commercial vehicles is it's so heavily regulated by not only the insurance companies, but FMCSA. If there's a passenger in a commercial vehicle that's not a driver or co-driver, and we can call the carrier and actually find out if they're an authorized passenger. So there's a FMCSA regulation about that. So, a lot of times companies will allow drivers to take their wives or whatever with them. And those are, pretty easy who or whatever she's looking for the day. But the more challenging ones are, who is this? I think her name is this or whatever, then you gotta look into it, but it does happen.
How are we looking for potential break without halfway through? Where are you at? I'm not sure. I just want to where you're at in your presentation.
You're pretty close to the end. Do you want to take a break now?
We'll just push, if you're saying close, meaning 5 to 10 minutes, we'll push through. If much more than that, we'll go a break.
We can get through it in 10 minutes. So again, these are drive shaft photos. That's a carrier bearing that's worn out there. You can see how it's shining. And the U-bolt, the bolt there is loose on the universal.
Yeah. Some of these things, these drivers must know something's up, right, on some of this stuff.
We'll get into that here just in part. So tires, the one on the right, that's a blowout, obviously. The one on the left, that didn't happen yesterday. That's been like that quite a while.
It's what you call a napalm.
Wheels, this one here is cracked. You can see the crack right down the middle. When you see wheels that are cracked, stud to stud is usually like a loose wheel or not properly installed. When you see them cracked from the vent holes or the hand holes down, that's usually indication of overloading. Loose lug nuts, much more common than you think.
And don't the truckers, it's my understanding, don't they have to inspect their trucks on a regular basis and keep a log? Like do a walk around or anything like that? Is that something you?
They do, yeah, they're required to do a pre-trip inspection. Yep.
So would that be every day or?
Yep.
Okay, a daily walk around
Yep.
and record it.
Only if there's violations. If there's no violations, then technically it doesn't have to be recorded.
Okay, but there's an expectation, you pull somebody over that they walked around and didn't see this or didn't record it or didn't take action.
Is there more of your issues with owner operators or out of state or out of Canadian drivers, or I'm guessing that the Swifts, the Carpenters, the Yellow for whatever the names are these days, their stuff, I assume, is in a whole program corporately. That's not where your problems are or not? Is it regular trucking companies that are more of your issues, or is it?
It's just across.
It's all over.
Yeah. The bigger carriers are not any more squared away.
Okay, that's what I
The
was.
problem is like going back to the safety rating, they have many more trucks, right? So an owner operator that gets put out of service, that out of service violation is going to significantly impact his safety rating. Whereas if you had, 10,000 trucks on the road, that one out of service violation isn't necessarily going to have as much of an impact.
And we have 30 officers out, is what I think I said, yeah, 30.
20, 24.
Okay. And this activity of inspections and interactions is core of this job, is day-to-day. How much of this interaction goes on Iowa on a day-to-day basis in Vermont? Is this the core function of what they're doing every day?
Or function.
So somewhere out there, one of your officers is probably having an interaction with a truck, right? This somewhere.
Yep. Probably several of them. Yeah. So our enforcement is, generally we do fixed site details, either like 2 or 3 days a week, depending. And the other days are our patrol. And then we do outreach, crash investigation, all of our other job duties on top of that, as they occur.
So what's the flavor on the size of the fines and who gets the funds on fines? So
So the overweight tickets do not go to the general fund. Overweight fines go directly to the Agency of Transportation to essentially repair the road damage that was done by the truck. That's no different if the municipalities that we talked about, if they write overweight tickets, the state will keep a portion for processing it, but the municipality will get the majority of that funding. There have been some municipalities in the past that have abused that. It should not be a revenue generating thing. It's a safety thing, and that's what it's about.
what would be a fine for a trucker who, does something blatantly wrong or, driving with a missing tire?
So again, like, it depends on how many other violations there are. It depends on what the violation is. The overweight fines can get extremely expensive. I've written overweight tickets in excess of $10,000. It depends. The more violation, when it comes to the overweight stuff, the more violations that they have in a year, they're assessed additional penalties, 5, 10, and 15% on top of what the original fine is. And then if the truck is operating under an excess weight permit already at 99,000 pounds, if they exceed that by more than 10,000 pounds, that fine will double. So you can get really large fines very quickly. But it still doesn't seem to be a deterrent for some companies. That's what we're talking about. These were attempted repairs that were found roadside. Vice grips. So that guy had an air leak, trimmed a line shut with vice grips. Pretty hard to say you didn't know about it. This one here is more interesting. You can see so this is the frame rail, the chain and the binder. The frame rail was actually cracked. And the driver knew it was cracked, but he put a chain and a binder in between the cross members to keep tension on it, to keep driving it. Pretty hard to say that you didn't know about that. But these are the types of things that if we weren't out there enforcing this, there would be much, much more of this. And then lastly, what we do a lot of crash investigations. A lot of this is weather related stuff, especially with the big trucks. When we do have a reportable crash, not only will we do the state crash report, but we will do a post-crash inspection to try to gather as much information we can about the condition of the truck prior to that crash. So if there were things that the truck had defects that contributed to the crash, or identifying things that need to be repaired before that truck can be put back on the road. And we do get train crashes. This was, I went to this in Sharon a couple of years ago. That was a loaded Amtrak passenger train that split the truck and trailer into pieces.
And usually runs.
Mhm.
That train was doing, I think, 57 miles per hour at impact,
Wow.
and nobody got hurt. It's like, crashes involving buildings. This was in Putney. This is an ATM at a drive-through bank. A tractor trailer went through the drive.
I can see McDonald's, but not the bank.
Crashes involving hazardous materials. These happen quite a bit. This one was in the town of Barnard. They spilled about 2,000 gallons of home heating oil. That one was the one last year in Linden that burned the bridge.
Is that propane there or is that what we want?
That is propane.
On the one on the
On
right?
the right, yeah. That burned off for, I believe, 2 days. And they had to replace the entire bridge.
Change the person straight on the girders.
And then lastly, we do regulate buses. We'll do school bus inspections. We do them periodically throughout the year, but we do a big push prior to school starting at the end of the summer to make sure that the companies do have their equipment in order. And we help out the state police quite a bit with passenger vehicles too on snowy days when there's just not enough of them to take everything. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions about what we do?
Thank you very much. We're gonna take a little break before the next piece, I guess, that our guy got.
Fire on the bridge.